Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you confirm whether you can hear me?
Good morning, doctor. It's well clear.
Okay. Welcome back again. So I do not think you need any introduction about myself. Uh, so welcome to IT509 Web Technologies module. So in today's session, my plan is we'll discuss about the course, the contents, also assessment, delivery strategies, and also we'll start with our first topic about static website creation using HTML. So that's basically my plan for today. Right. So here is an extract from your handbook about the module. As you can see, we want to improve or develop your knowledge on the modern web technologies and its applications. And hopefully, when you complete the module, you should be able to, identify the web technologies available for modern technologies available for web development, as well as use these technologies to develop your own interactive web application. So hopefully we will have a group work where whatever the content that we will discuss in the lecture sessions will be put into practice. You, as a group, you are going to build an educational web application with using these technologies. So, uh, so I will come to the content later on. So this particular course module we planned in such a way that we have some, theory. We discuss, for example, how different technologies used, their syntax, and then we will work on with a couple of interactive sessions where we put them into practice. So the allocated number of hours is we will have about like 20 hours of lectures and practicals 20 hours. So altogether, we will have sessions about like 40 hours for everything. Right. There are some recommended text in your module as well, and this is slightly different. So those who do not have any knowledge on these technologies that which we are going to cover in the module, I highly suggest that you start have a look, because I might not be able to cover everything, but I will cover the key concept from each of these technologies. So maybe you can look at what the existing resources available on the net, especially one thing I could suggest in the tutorial form is W3 schools. You can have a look at it. But if you want to have a very theoretical understanding about these, technologies, I suggest Jennifer's book on learning web design, where we will give you a good understanding about the theoretical aspect of developing, as well as using web technologies. And most of the content of my slides actually I have taken from her book as well, which is I think a good reference if you want to know, if you want to have a thorough understanding about these technologies. Right. Now here are the assessment details. There are about like 20% is allocated for continuous assessment, which we will do it as kind of a group work. So each of the session you will have some work to start the work, and then that work will contribute to your final group work assignment. I will come to into detail. So that will allocate 20 marks. That is for continuous assessment. Now, then we have two examinations like mid-semester examination as well as end-semester examination. So in mid, we have about like 30 marks, which evaluates the initial part of the module. And then the end semester examination, we evaluate the whole, module. Right. So before we start to the theoretical part. So let me briefly introduce your group work assignment, which is the core component in this module. So the idea is, as a group, you are going to create an educational software system using the web technologies we will discuss in the module. And the ideas are like you should be able to develop a system such a way that it should, supports for multiple users, and it should also support for interactive interaction with multiple users, as well as it should consist of dynamic content. So, most of the web technologies that we discuss in the module can be directly applied here as well. So, these are some of the subtasks that we expect you to do. You first start or coming up with the topics. So that will part we will do today itself, and then you are going to also identify some users of the system, because we know that each and every user have different access levels or different activities which they are actually involved. So that part we have to clear out in the beginning, and then we will identify all the functionalities of these users. Then uh, another aspect is I would like to also make use of your knowledge on modeling techniques that you have learned in databases. You have already used entity relationship diagram, also like UML diagram. So I want you to use these different modeling techniques when you're implementing your system. And finally, you should be able to use the implement the system. Now, when you look at the submission aspect of this, the initial 2 weeks time, you are supposed to submit the description of the project, list of users and features, then user interface design, conceptual model, physical model, populate that database, and then we will have a final submission. So when you're using a final submission, make sure that you are going to submit all the scripts together with the data that if you have insert. And then as a last part of this, because this is a group work, so I would like to have a small presentation of your contributions. Plus, we will also have individual Viva just to understand your contribution in the project, right? So these are the submission that we will expect during this. Right. Before we continue, do you have any questions on the contents? Right. So in this one, I would like to see how many of you are already familiar with the web technologies. So select, web technologies you are familiar so far, right? You can select multiple technologies if you are familiar with everything. You can use, all the 5 listed here. Shall we start then? Right. It looks like, majority of you are familiar with HTML and MySQL, and then some familiarity with CSS and PHP. The JavaScript, I think we have to go from the beginning. Thank you guys for voting this. So let's look at like what are the your developments, what are the projects that you have done using these technologies. So let's move on to the next one. Right. So please, type some web applications you have developed so far. Okay, so looks like you know you have done actually several web applications. We have library system, school management system, vote management system, GPA calculation, online food ordering system. Okay, so that's good. So so which means we could now go back and see what we are supposed to do in this. Right. Now, I told you like in this module, so maybe I'm repeating some of the content that you have already learned, but since not everyone in the same level, I'm going to assume that we will be starting, but be free highlighting important part of these applications. But if you want something else to be included, maybe you can suggest me, right? Any other topics that you want me to include um, in the contents, right? So let's start today's session. So I'm going to briefly look at the internet and the World Wide Web, especially uh, the where are we right now, and also briefly I'm going to talk about the client and server computing architecture, and also the technologies that we will use in client server computing. And then we'll start with the HTML introduction, and there'll be a small group work. Right. Now, some of these actually slides might be a little bit outdated, but I think the information there is still valid, although the numbers have changed drastically over the time. Now, what this graphic shows you is what is happening in the internet every 60 seconds, right? Um, so you can see this is actually a couple of years back, the statistics. So you can see if you take like social media networks like Facebook, uh, there'll be about like 243,000 photos uploaded, 70,000 hours of video content watched. You can see if you take Instagram, for example, at that time, more than 65,000 photos uploaded. So you see how active use of different technologies. Let me pick another one. Let's say file handling, Dropbox, for example. There are more than 800,000 files uploaded in Dropbox. You see, very important that we have a lot of applications out there, and people actively interact with those applications. Again, another one which shows you it's in 2018, what is exactly happening in social media, and then how expand these technologies. For example, 2007, it was less than 1 billion. 2017, it was about like 2.5 billion. 2021 estimated, it's about like 3 billion. So you can check the latest one, which, increased over the years. So now all these internet connectivity or internet technologies are there. So when you look at the internet, we know that it consists of networks of networks, right? So these networks consist of private, public, academic, business, government, all network together. And the graph that you will see actually from the Wikipedia, where actually it graphically shows you all the connectivity available in the internet. Looks like, right, picture of the internet. And each of these nodes, what we have is unique IP addresses which represent the servers available, or the clients available in the internet. So there are a lot of uses we can see in the internet. We will use it for communication, especially email, research, downloading, discussion, interactive gaming, education, social networks, electronic newspapers. So these are some of the users. So you see that it's very important that all the users of the internet. And if you look at like the active number of users by 2017, it was about like 3.8 billion. And internet users as a percentage, that time it was more than 50% up actually actively using the internet. And mobile internet users about like 3.4 billion. And mobile internet users as a percentage of the population is almost 93%. You can see how actively we are using internet. Now, when we look at the World Wide Web, where we have the place where we have the information, now this is where the important comes in the web technologies, and especially this information we written using what we call the hypertext markup language, right? Which consists of multimedia information, images, video, audio, and some software components as well, right? So it's very important that we will, develop content because many people are using. Then the browser is the software that now we will use to connect in the internet. And these are the traditional set of, browser available. Or you can see the Opera, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Explorer, or Edge. So those are some of the browsers available. And you can see how the change of statistics in early days, we have Internet Explorer comes into the picture. And now most of the time you will see the Chrome actually dominating. So things were changing, and not everyone is using the browser. So we have to make sure that when you're presenting information using different browsers, they should be looks should be the same, right? So there are things that we need to uh, think about this. Okay, next one, the client server architecture. So in the internet, most of the time when you're actually getting data or connecting to some website, the data that we are accessing is placed in what we call the servers, and the requests are made from the client. So usually you can see the client server architecture, which is between one or more, clients. So when you have a client server system, usually there will be a user interface. That using that user interface, you can enter the data, you can actually query the data, and also you can have the presentation logic. And then servers usually you store the data, and it will provide the data access and database management functions. And then there'll be an application. So in application logic, for example, is could be between server and the client. If you look at typical client server interaction, client usually requests information from the server, and then you will get the operation and respond to the client. So here is a graphic where we shows you the client and server side of it. And so in the client side, as you can see, it supports graphical user interface. And these are some of the most popular technologies as well as frameworks. So Bootstrap, React, Angular, jQuery, Swift.js, like these are some of the technologies that you will see for the front end. And in your backend, the server side, there are web servers like Apache. There could be multiple backend languages like PHP, Python, Java, Node.js, and so on. And the databases also could come from many flavors like MongoDB, MySQL, Redis, PostgreSQL, and so on. Right. So here are the group work that we are planning for today's session. So I'll come to that then once we actually finish basic introduction to the HTML. And then you should identify the users, and remember this will be an education application. right? So not a traditional web-based application that we are going to develop, something is actually useful and could be used for education purpose. And then when you're designing that, I want you to use different modeling, techniques which can be used to model your problem. Right. Now let's start. Uh, First of all, let me present the basic structure. I know you already know, and then we'll do some exercises, and then finally we will have the group for today. Now, usually when we talk about different languages available, especially in computing, there are different types of languages, and one is what we call the markup language. Now, markup language usually we use for presentation. Now, how exactly you should present some of these things. So the language HTML usually we use for the structure of the website, right? So website usually have several web pages. So structure we use to describe uh, the structure of the web pages using HTML. And they are the building blocks, right? All these HTML pages that we see the HTML elements are the building blocks. And these elements we represent using what we call the tags. So that means the tags we can use for heading to say that, okay, that text is for a header, and then paragraph, table, and so on. So when we use application software like the browsers that we have seen earlier, they will not shows you any HTML tags, but instead they use the tags to render the content, right? So for example, if you use headers, the font size will be increased, right? And so on. Right, now if you look at the anatomy of HTML elements, this is how it looks like. Usually, many of the cases you will see open and closing tags, and there'll be a content in between, right? Now, for example, we have, let's say the headers, we will represent headers from H1 to H6. So let's assume the second example, the example that we will see, we want to represent at the largest header possible. We put H1 as the opening tag, and then H/H1, which indicates the closing tag of H1. But remember that some of the HTML elements you don't need a closing tag. Sometimes you have only a one tag, initial tag only. So I'll come to those things later. So the main thing that you should actually learn is basically you start with the document structure, right? So in this one, you will see, you can see the basic document structure. And usually we will start with the doc type, right? So the doc type will tell you what this exactly is. So currently now we have version 5, that means HTML5. So which indicates that we have HTML5 tag. So document is written in HTML5. So that's what it means, this doc type HTML. Now then we have HTML element. So we start with HTML and ends with /HTML. And within that, we have two parts. So basic document we can divide in two parts as header and also the body. So head element will indicate the header part of the document, and body element uses the body, which is actually going to show up in the browser window, right? So within the header, now you can see two tags, meta and title. The meta element usually used to provide the metadata. Now, in this particular case, we are going to specify what we call the encoding, character encoding. So that means what kind of letters, numbers, and symbols are possible. And what we are saying here is we say that it uses Unicode version, right? So that is what you will see here. And then we'll provide the title. And the last one is within the body, we can type some text which will show you, this is only the one actually shows you within the web page, right? So having said that, the next one is how do you create a, a web page? And when we want to web page, usually we can use different IDs. So it's perfectly all right if you are already familiar with some ID, please use them. There's no point of type it everything manually. But to start, we can create simple text editors such as Notepad to do the same. So what we could do is we can use a simple Notepad to write HTML content, and then we can save the file using HTML, and then we can use a browser to open that. So let's start that. Okay, so let's open up a notepad. So here is my notepad, and then just type whatever you have. So in this particular case, I'm going to say doc type HTML. To note here, so for example, early version, we have XHTML, for example, which says that everything should be typed in, lowercase letters. But in HTML version 5, you don't specify like that. So for example, you can either use capitalization or that means lowercase or uppercase. Yes. So the next one is we have HTML, which indicates the HTML document. And within that, we can have two types. We have head, ends with slash head. Then we have body, end with slash body. Right. Now, within the head, we have two things. You can see here, we have meta character set. I told you this will define what characters are possible. So here we will say Unicode characters. And then we have title. Right. So let me say it's the page title and slash title. Right. And within the body, you can have, basically the content that you want to show. So simply we will say hello world. So let me save this. So I'm going to create IT. Right. And within that, I will say, okay, this is hello world, our first HTML document. Remember, I will use in double quotes and saved it. Now that I have everything here, right, I can go to desktop. Here is my file. It says hello world. I will double click on it, right? And here is how it looked like. So I can now see, right? So one side we have the body structure, and then the other side we have the outcome. So simply we type hello world within the body structure. Right. Okay. Next one. So let's start with a very simple one. So let me give you a simple text, right? And then we will work on it. This is actually from the book. So I'm going to use the notepad again. So we will start with some text first. So it's a simple text, right? And there are a couple of paragraphs, let's say, and then we have some information, right? Something like this. Let me copy paste in the chat, right? And I want you to repeat the same. So you can have it in the text file. So I have put in the chat. So let's start with this. Now create a web page using this one, right? Create a web page using this one. Just only I want you to show me the text, right? And then share your screenshot in our WhatsApp group. I want everybody to work on. I know that you already know this, but make sure that you did it. You just copy paste the text, create a web page, simple web page, just to show you the text as the outcome of the web page. Let's start. So simply what I can do is I can just copy paste this one, and this is what I need. So instead of hello world, this time I'm going to just copy paste, right, what I had earlier. Right. Now let me save this as a different name. Let me put it as index. Usually index is what as the main page. So I just saved it. Right. Now let me refresh. Now I can see Pradeep sharing his work. Good. Let me refresh myself. Let me open up this index. So we have index here. Okay, this is how it looked like. Although there are spacing, you can see everything in a single place, because the spaces will not count here, because it shows you as a one single, everything is into a one place, right? Now, since we have not marked up any text, you can see that you don't see anything. So let's use some markup elements, the text elements, to change how it looks. So now what we going to do, I'm going to use the main heading. Now in this one, the main heading is this one. So I will first put the the highest header H1, which indicates that that is the header structure. So let me save it and let me refresh it. Now you can see it stands out, right? Now similar to that one, so other headers I can put H2. So let me use here H2. So this one is H2. So slash H2. Another header here, we will put H2. Again, I will put slash H2. Third one here, we have H2 slash H2. So headers are, there are 6 different header levels. H1 is the largest, then H2, it be smaller to that, H3, H4, H5, H6. Right, now let me save it again. So this time when I refresh it, now we can see different topics we have highlighted. Okay, now let's put all the paragraphs. So you can see here there are 3 paragraphs which we can update using paragraphs. So we can put P just to indicate the start of the paragraph, and we can say slash P, which indicates the end of the paragraph. Similar, the second one again, we have a paragraph, then we have slash P. Similar to this one, we have paragraph, and then we have slash P. So let me save, right? Let me refresh, right? So it looks good, right? Okay, Prasad also shared. Thanks, Prasad, for sharing the screenshot. Right, let's move on. Now we have put up all the headers and also paragraphs. Right, now the next one is you can have, for example, some text, right? Highlighted. We can have emphasize, for example. So we have, you have fun, we are handling the cooking. So let's say we emphasize this one, right? Let's put EM and we'll put slash here. So usually you should look at in little bit italicized. So if I show you in large, now you can see it's emphasized. Right, now this is just to show you like what it looks like, right? Without any changing, we have seen how we can show you this. Now, when we discuss different types of elements so far, we have seen different elements so far. And usually we can use open and close tags, except meta. Now, for example, here meta is an example where we have only opening, right? So there are sometimes we have only a single element, like line break is one example, right? So line break is one example. Now, similar to that, we will discuss in this later on. But let's say you want to include an image. So the command is we have to use img. So image img is also a single tag. So let's start with the image now. So I will give you a link first. So in the chat session, I will type a link. This is the image. I'm going to use it. So I'm going to give you a link where you can get the image. And here is the image. So I'm going to first save the image. And in this particular case, I'm trying to save it the same place, right? So I'm going to go back, click save image as, and in that I will go to my folder, which is the same place. And I'm going to save it as Black Goose, and it's a PNG image. So let me save it. Now I'm going to change the code. I'm going to include that one. So within H1, right? So I'm going to put the image. So here we have IMG, SRC. So that is how we can include the image. Right? We can now use it, the name of blackgoose.png, right? And we can save it. So let me save. So now let me refresh it. So here is my page so far, right? So it look like this now. Now, sometimes when you put up, this is like a logo, right? Sometimes when you put up like this, let's say you have a slow internet connection, this might not shows you the image. So whenever situation like this, we normally provide alternate text. So for example, ALT used for that. These are called attributes. So we can modify our tag behavior using these attributes. So I will say logo here. So which is complete. For example, when I again, so I miss double quote here. Let me save it. Refresh, you can see this. So let me make a change here just to indicate that it's not available. So usually alternative text should be available, right? So that's the idea of this. So you can see here it's logo, it because of this alternate text, right? So let me correct that. And here is how it look like so far. Now you can see here, these two are together. Now, if you want to go to the next line, we have to put a break here. So the best would be like after the logo, we can put up a line break. So line break is also a single tab, right? So if you do like this, it should look like now. Right. Okay. Now everything is looks good. We have everything for a small website. Now, the next thing is I'm going to talk about very briefly before we go on each individual element separately. How do you change the look and feel, right? Now, so far, the structuring we have done with HTML, we have used headers, two levels of headers we have used here, H1 and H2. And then we define paragraphs, and then we have included an image, right? Now everything is here. Now let's change the look with the style sheet. And we will have a separate session on style sheet, but here just to give you a brief idea of what we are going to do, right? So there are three ways we can, have a style sheet, which I will discuss. And in this particular case, I'm going to have style sheets within the document itself. Now, to include a style sheet, we should go to the header, right? And then when you talk about that, So when you have that, so let's go after the title, and after the title, I'm going to have the style, which I will write down CSS for the style sheets. So the starting would be like I will put another tag called style, and then we'll end up with the style. Now, we will discuss like, we can have inline style, we can have separate as a text, or we can have within the tag itself. We will discuss this in coming sessions. But here, let's first talk about, giving a styles to body, for example. Now, what happens? Let's say we can change the body, giving some background color, different color, for example. So I can modify the body tag using style sheets notation, using curly brackets like this. I put a body, and then within the curly bracket, I can put the styles. Now, for example, background color, to change, we can say background color. We will have colon. So usually we have attribute and value pair. So background is the attribute, and then we can have value, right? For example, I can say yellow. Let me save. Let me refresh. So it becomes yellow color, right? Or I can just type it as red. Color information, again, I will have a separate session. So we can simply just change the color. But most of the time, when you want to write down the names, the color choices will be limited. So more advanced way of using color modes like RGB. So usually the mode we have RGB information in hex notation. So each of the component, we have the values going from 0 to 255. So that means in hex notation, it will be 00 to FF. So FF means 255, which is the highest value. So we can have RGB form. So for example, red color, we can represent like this hash. We can say FF, which indicates the highest value of red, then lowest value of RG green and the blue. So if I put in this form, and if I refresh again, no change. This is red. Right, now let me put FF as the second part, RGB, that should be green, isn't it? So now you see it looks like a green. The next one, RGB blue. So it's a blue color. So again, we will discuss how we can actually get this information. So if you use like HTML codes for colors, you can find out what colors you can see. So I'm actually using the color given in the page itself, where it indicates the FAF2E4, which is a very light color. Right. Looks good, right? Now, then we can also define, again, these things we'll talk about, the margin, the spaces. Now, usually when you don't have any spacing, it looks ugly. So usually we can put up, right-hand side and left-hand side, the margin value. You can have 4 values if you want, or you can repeat twice, right? Head and the top and bottom, you can have it. So the next one, I'm going to put up some margin. So in this particular case, if I put margin, so I will put percentages, the 10%. In this particular case, left and right, we'll have 10% margin. And top and bottom, we don't have any margin, so that will indicate 0. let's see. Okay, there's a spelling mistake. So let me save it. So you can see when I refresh it. So now we will have a spacing here. These both spaces, top and bottom, we don't have any. Again, I'll discuss these in detail. Then the font, you can change, what fonts you use. So for that, I'm going to use font family. It's the attribute. Font family. We are going to use sans serif, which says no serif, which means in headers you don't have, curlies. So sans serif is the font I have used. You see how it has changed. So that actually modifies the body, which again, my discussion for next session. Right. Now let's look at, let's change our headers as well. So we have two types of headers. So let me change first H1s. Let's say H1. Again, we can have curly brackets to start and end, and then we can have attribute value pairs. Okay, so first one, H1, that means header right now, it's left aligned. So let's say we want to say it should come into the middle. So the attribute is text aligned, and the value is center, which centers this. You can actually say left and right, which will change. So you can see H1 is centered. So you can see H1 contains both the image as well as the text. So now it's actually centered in the page. You can try right and left. You can see what will happen. Font family, usually we can say serif with curlies. So font family, we can say serif font we can use. You can see now goes back to the change, right? Earlier sans serif override what we have written in the body, right? So body text earlier we use, but we specify only for H1. Now you can see some curvatures here. And then font weight, we can say normal. So when you do that, you can see now bold is removed. Earlier it was bolded. So we said weight is normal. Then let's make it uppercase. We can say font transform. So usually we know header, we will put in uppercase value. So per case, right? Let me save it. Font transform. We put uppercase. It should be text, not font. Sorry. Text transform. So you can see everything is now in uppercase. Simply, we have to select appropriate attribute and value pairs. Let's put up some borders. Again, border we will discuss separately, right? So, for example, we can say that, okay, we will take one more. Border bottom. 1 pixels solid. You see there's a small line which is the border of this. Let's change the color. Now we know we are using hash values. B1DC. Let me save it. Just very light borderline you can see, which separates out. Let's put up some margin. Earlier, remember, we just say margin, which indicates that we talk about all the 4 places. But let's put some margin only for the top. So the attribute is margin top. Again, you can give it in different values. So I'm going to use 30 pixels. The px means pixels, right? So you don't see a large difference here. Margin top, it's 30 pixels. So that's about the H1, right? Similarly, let's put H2 as well. So H2, let's say we want to change the color. Let's say color. Let's put D1, 63, 3C. So that means we have changed the color of H2. You see it applies all the H2 tags, which is what we want. And we can change the font size as well. So let's say font size. So these font sizes, again, I will discuss later on how the font sizes are used, again, separately when we discuss the theory. Right. Now, if you do it correctly, your outcome should look like this. And this is exactly what what I want you to do in my first few sessions. You start with the structuring your content and then providing look and feel using adding style sheets, right? So it's very important that you understand these ideas. Right. The next one that I want you to discuss is, let's go one by one and let's try to understand these different tags. And this is exactly what I want you to do. Since already you have the basics, so I'm not going to spend time on that, going through each and everything. So maybe I will briefly go through the theory part, and then I will let you to work on it, right? Right. Before we move on to the text, anything that you would like to discuss? On this? No? Right. If that is the case, so let's go back to the slides. We were discussing about the basic structure of the document. And this is where we have started, right? So the next thing, as we have already seen, that we should know different HTML tags we use to change the structure of our document, right? So the first one we have seen headings, we have already used H1, H2, different header levels. Paragraphs we have used, and the line breaks. But some, remember, we don't have any, right? The second one is we can modify these tags using different attributes. For example, anchor, or if you want to create a link, we use href hyperreference, and then with that we can actually provide the URL that you need to visit, right? So href here is known as attribute, so we can use always attribute and value pairs. Okay, very important one. So some tags are known as block elements, which means they are like small rectangle element, like H1, if you remember, everything before and after actually separated because it's taken as a block element. Similar goes with the paragraph as well. When you put up a paragraph with the next element, you have some space. It recognizes as blocks. But sometimes some elements will not generate a new line. Like header, if you use, always you start the next line, start with the beginning, right? That means you start with the new line. And then what we could do is inline elements, we don't have to start with a new line. Like if you look at emphasize, bold, italics, right? They are known as inline elements. So these are the two types that we normally see. And then we talk about empty elements when you don't have a close tag. So here are some list of existing elements. We already have H1 to H6. These are different headings going from the largest to smallest. Paragraph, bold, italic. You can also use small for small text, subscript and superscript. HR is for horizontal rule and PR is for line break. Right. Another one that I would like to discuss is now when you use CSS styles within the HTML tag, it is possible with the style tag, style attribute. So when you say style attribute, you can use any tag name and you say style, and then you can provide the property and the value. For example, let's say you want to change the background color to red. So what you do, you will say, okay, style within double quotes, you say background color, colon, red. Right. Then sometimes we need to just ignore the values or ignore the commands in the HTML document. So the best way to do is you use comment tags. So you will have angle bracket, exclamation mark, 2 dashes, that is starting, end with 2 dashes and the close angle brackets, which indicates the HTML comments. So you can use this just to neglect whatever the text. Color information, we already have a small discussion, so let's go into detail. Now, color information can be given in various ways. Now, one way we have already seen that you can write the name of the color. But the problem will be that, and you will have a limited number of colors you can represent using the names. So some are given here, tomato, orange, torch blue, light gray. These are the names that you can use to change the colors. Right. Now, the next thing that we have discussed is color information can be given in various ways. One way is you can just directly type the name. Second one, you can use hash code. So I told you already there are 6 values, and the first 2 indicates the red component, the next 2 is the green component, the last 2 represent the blue component. And that also can represent in this form RGB, and then you can provide the values. So these are different ways of representing the colors. Images. Now, images we have already seen that very important, especially when you are creating web pages. And how you start is simply you say IMG, SRC, and you can provide the name of the image. And alternate text is usually used if it is if the image not loaded sometimes, then we have this particular message will appear. Right, now let me show you some style commands, that is CSS style commands. So when you want to resize your image, you can use style command to change the width and height. So that is possible, right? So width and height could be used to provide the style. So you can change the size with the pixels 128 to 128. So that is possible. Right. That's about the images. Remember that usually when we talk about the image format, it's very important. So usually we can use PNG, JPG, or GIF. So these are the commonly used images, right? Sometimes we can also use some other formats like TIFF, BMP, EPS. So depend on what you want to do or what you want to have it, so that we have to use this. And when you're looking at the image, it will be basically inline element, and if you do it within the text, image will be displayed with the text itself, right? So that is important. So one thing is, the location of the image. Now, in here, I assume that the image is saved the same place as our file. So that's why there's no path. But let's say you have a image, and then you have to have, let's say, within a folder, then you have to state where the folder is, right? Or else if you're going to get image from some other website, you have to provide the full website URL, right? Again, it's very important that you use that. Right. Now, the dimensions that we have provided here. So as you can see, if you didn't specify the width and height, usually it'll show you the original width and height of the image, but always you can resize. But make sure that when you actually change in the width and height, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, you will see the size may distort, right? So this is another thing that you have to remember. So that's about images. Okay, another information is like, for example, you can also include images in the background as well. You can do it as background of a web page, or you can put it as a background of paragraph. So both are accepted. And the links we have already seen that we can use href and then the source, and which will indicate where to connect. So usually we use text to represent the links, but of course you can use images as well. Now another thing is, when you're creating what we call the local links, you can create local links. That means you can specify pages with the same website. Now, for example, we can say target. So when you say target attribute with href, we can say where you want to direct your page. Now, these are the values it's actually you can use. If you use underscore blank, it will open up in a new window. If you say underscore self, it will open in the same window. If you use underscore parent, open in the link document in the parent frame. Underscore top, link document in the full body of the window. So depend on where you want to show, you have to change the target attribute. Now, when you want to create images as a link, right? Again, very important. When you want to use images, simply what you need to do, instead of some text within the href or anchor tag, you can have an image. Right? So here is an example for how you may do this. Right? You can specify image. Right? That is how we can create the links. So let me show you some ideas that actually we have discussed earlier. Since we already should know how to use them, very important that we talk about these ideas. So let's put up this information, right? Okay. Right. The next one. So I will go back to my code just to show you some image decorations. Now to start with, I'm going to start from the beginning, where I'm going to create a new document. I just want to discuss how we can actually use images, especially with the change of the sizes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get a copy of the previous one. I will share the code with you. And I'm going to keep only about, I will remove the styles for the time being. So I don't need the styles. I'll keep only the image. So I'll remove the header information as well. And I'll remove the remaining parts. So here is what I have right now. So let me copy paste in the chat. I think this is not exactly what I want. See, only the very small one. Okay, so you can copy the second one. Right, let me save it as image dot html. Right. So what I'm trying to do here is, let me open up this. Okay, this is what I have right now. You can see, right? So if I go to my document, right? So let me go to my document, right? So it's in the same place as my other images, right? Let me create a new folder called images, right? And let me copy this. I'm going to create a copy of this. Let me put Control C. Within this, I will say Control V, right? So you can see I have two images. So now I will go here. I'm going to change this one. This is one image. The second one is, I can say image src images slash. Okay. So it's within the other folder. So now you can see there are two images, but the second image I have taken from the image I have saved within the images folder. Next one is actually we have taken this file from this website. Right? So the third one is, if you want it from a URL, you can have complete one, right? So for example, so what I could do is I can copy this, I can paste this. So the idea is I'm going to put, or I want to get this actually directly from this place. So I have actually saved it. So now you can see, refresh it. The third one I actually get by accessing image directly from there. Now you can see these are just the images. The next thing that actually I have discussed is you can use styles. The style command, and you can specify width and height, right? So now how do you know the width and height of actual image? So that we need to understand. So in this particular case, when you want to say style value, so you know the length and height of the image. So one way is you can go back to the folder, right? you can right click on the image. You can go to more options and you can go to properties. And if you go to details, you can see in my image, right? The size will be 175 pixel to 175. So now that I know it's 175 to 175, I can go back, right? And then I can change this. So what I'm going to do here, I will say style. So within bracket, I can specify width and height. So how do you put the width and height? We can say width, how many pixels, height, how many pixels. So in this particular case, we can go back, right? So width, I will say 175 pixels. So that's the first one. Then we can put height. So we can say 175 pixels and height, we can say 175 pixels. No change. If you refresh it, no change because you say, now let's change it, right? Now let's increase this by 2 times. So if I change this, right now we have 175, right? So let's make it 350. So this is what will happen. You see it's 2 times and this is 1 time. So if you have not proportionate, this is what will happen, right? The next one. So that's about, handling width and height. So for example, make sure that you increase both. And remember that depend on the resolution, sometimes it might not be clear. Right here, you can say the size of the image now enlarged. So these are raster images, which means you might see the checker effect, which means like you might see the pixels. You might see it. Right. The next one is like, how do you combine this with links? So always you can image, you can put it as a link, right? So the idea is we will have, instead of href, so we have anchor. Within that, you can put it as an image, right? So that's what you can do. Okay, so that's one thing what you can do. Okay, so given that we have discussed the basic ideas of images, now let's, to finish our discussion, I would like to discuss some other, elements available. right? Right now, what we have discussed so far is we discussed the lists, sorry, images. So let me discuss other things as well. Right now, we can talk about the list, for example. When you talk about the list in HTML, there are three types of lists we can discuss. Unordered list, which is, I think, very useful. For example, the basic unordered list looks like this. Start with UL and ends with UL. And each item we represent using LI, which is list item. And then you can actually change the what style type we use. These are default values. But later in the course, we will see you can have many variations. You can create many variations using the same unknown list. Now, for example, we will see later on all the menu items that we want to show. We can put it as an unordered list. And using style sheets, we can change it as menu items. Right? So this is what we will see. Right. Then we have ordered list items. Again, you can change how the different ways of representing these list item markers. So default, we can have 1, 2, 3, and so on. You can have capital A, capital B, capital C, and so on. So different way we can actually represent them. Right. Then last one is the description list, which you can have description title, which is, for example, what you need to describe. And then you can have a description data, which is TD. So it's something like you have some item and you describe more. For example, here we have two titles, coffee and milk. And we can describe about the coffee saying that, okay, this is a black hot drink, and the milk, it's a white cold drink, and so on. Right. But the next part, there are more elements available in HTML, especially HTML5, right? So, for example, you can use long quotations, we call block quote, pre-formatted text, like let's say you want to have, let's say, programming code, we have pre-formatted, or you can have a poem, right? So we can have pre-formatted one. You can have figures, figure captions, right? So these are like different, ways of using this, right? Okay, a couple of examples. Now, let me take our previous page itself just to explain the same. So long quotations means we can actually have a source from another source, right? So again, let me take this example. I'm actually going to put it here. It says, we have going to say something about from another source. So it says renowned type designer Matthew Carter has this to say about his profession, right? And then this information actually coming from somebody, someplace else. So the tag here, it use block. So block quote can have other elements. You can have paragraph headers like this. And when you save it and when you refresh it, it looks like this. So here is the paragraph. And here are the other elements within this, right? So that's how it looks like this. Now, the second one that I would like to discuss is pre-formatted text. Now, usually we have already seen the spacing, right? We'll ignore usually, right? But some cases, we want to keep all the spaces exactly as it is, right? So let's take an example. So let's take this example, right? I'll take again a simple copy of this again from the same book, which I will share. So you can have some spaces. So I will have paragraph. Let me save it. Usually you will see it as a single row, right? Although there are some spaces. So let me put a lot of spaces is, let me put some spaces like this example, right? Beginning also I will put some spaces, right? Some spaces like this. So let's say we put it like this. Although we put a lot of spaces and with all these different lines, and if you save it, you don't see any difference here. It will actually represent the single line. But there's a command, there's a tag called pre-formatted text. Instead of P, we will put pre-formatted. Now see what will happen. When I refresh, yes, it's normally represent using Fourier text, right? Same with, you will see here the commands, and the spaces are preserved as it is. So sometimes this is useful, let's say, when you want to include, let's say, you have written some code in some programming language and you want to put it as it is. So one way is you can use pre-formatted text. That is possible. Right. Okay. Another element. In HTML5, there's another element called figure element, right? Now, figure could be an image or video, or it could be some code like some coding that we are going to use. And the point is, with the figures, we can have the description of the figure, right? So, for example, now we have seen some coding right here, pre-formatted. Let me start with that. Let's say we have some CSS code. So I will put it as a pre-formatted one. Right? So I will paste it. So let's say we have small code window. Let's say this is the code. I will put some spacing, right? And some spaces here as well. Okay. So this is some code, right? So since we have pre-formatted code, when you refresh it, so it'll actually represent exactly as it is. You see, it's like a code. Now figure can use to give some figure captions. So one thing we can do is we can have figure caption. We have say figure, right? And this is also we can say slash figure. So let me save it. Let me refresh it. Now we represent this as a figure. So we can have a caption or we can describe what this code is. So for that, we have to use what we call figure caption. Big caption. Let's say sample CSS rule. And then we end with figure caption. So so you can see now, so it gives you a small figure caption for this. Right. I think that's enough for today. The time's up. I have a few more things to discuss. For example, how page content could be arranged. So for example, how we can have divisions, the div command. We can have main content, we call main, header, footer, section, article, navigation, or a side, right? Or address. So these are like some of what we call uh, page content, which I will discuss next week, right? And then I will also want to discuss about the forms, and with that we can work on this. Right. Now going back to our group work. So what I want you guys want to do, I want you to have members, 3 members for a group, and you want to work with this group work. This is a very simple one, nothing much to do for the time being. For this week, I want you to think about a simple education application. Remember, this is not a just general web page. I want you to think about to developing a full-featured web-based interactive educational application. Interactivity should be there. So for this week, I want you to create, project groups, and then the maximum number of students is 3, and then you first propose uh, the titles for these educational applications, right? Once you get the approval, so we can proceed, identify the users, their functionalities, and so on, right? Okay, so let's finish for today then. And I hope to meet you guys next week with the last part of HTML session. Thank you.